Greetings. This will probably end up being in two parts, but this is my introduction to the holistic, spiritual, magical, and occult communities. You see, they all have similar essence and similar ideals, but they have variations on how they're expressed. First, and I've talked about definitions, but to me, they're very important that you realize what I mean by things. By well, a lot of these movements. I have a friend who's in Georgia that used to defend me and other people who were doing magic because she was in some New Thought church that was talking about how witches were satanic. And I've run into at a spiritual center here, a holistic center here, when I tried to get a wizards consultancy going in the city I'm living in. I ran into regularly telling these holistic spiritual people that no, I'm a magic user. I am not satanic. I am not evil. I don't eat babies, stuff like that. So I want to give you an idea what these different groups, where they resonate, so that because I have met after years of being burned at different spiritual centers because they were all more holistic, new age, spiritual. I've met a group online of light workers. They're mainly spiritual people. They're the most wonderful people I've met. They actually live what they're supposed to be living. And they don't care if I cast spells. They think it's great. They work with ascended masters. Oh, cool, she casts. We're all working for something better. And that is very encouraging because I do not like to discourage people to follow, if you'll forgive the term, follow their bliss, as Campbell, I can't think of his first name, middle-aged melancholy or something. Joseph Campbell, he said that the goal was to follow your bliss. Well, I'm going to give you a wonderful quote by Dion Fortune, or Viola Firth, which was her, if you'll forgive the term, muggle name. The most illuminated, self-defined occultist of her age, Dion Fortune wrote of the occult. Until one studies the literature of the subject, one is utterly unaware of its extent. It reaches from the oral traditions on the one hand through the mythologies developed and systemized in the ancient literatures to the writings of the highly trained philosophers whose speculation led them beyond our bourne of time and space. Occultism, however, is more than a science to be pursued objectively. It provides a philosophy of life derived from its experiences, and it is this philosophical or even religious aspect that attracts most of those who devote their lives to it. Occultism is a sacred science and must be approached with reverence. To study occultism is to connect oneself up with a great powerhouse in the unseen. In many ways, that can be the definition of every group that I'm going to talk about. But I first want to give you, and they are sort of categorizing stereotypes, but they're things I've run into, and they're just ways to look at groups. Because I remember Isaac Bonwitz talking about how you couldn't be a druid if you weren't environmentally active, because us left-wing, tree-hugging, hippie-trippy granola crunchers had to live our truth. So unfortunately, politics or left, right, things like that are in the mainstream mind, and a lot of times they're in the mind of the people who practice this. So the conventional ways, the first way is by color. You've run into this, black magic lodge, white magician, somebody who practices gray. I don't like this category, and I'll explain it in a different video. But a lot of people think in these terms. Oh, I'm white magic. Well, you're black man. Oh, you do great. It's just. And then handedness, right hand, left hand, middle. I mean, the Buddhism is called the middle way. You've got, if you look at Dresden Files, for examples, Michael Carpenter, Paladin of the Cross, practices right hand. He does right hand path work. Left hand is Justin Morningway, Dresden's uncle. He does things, and I think I'm going to get into it more deeply elsewhere because the stereotypic left hand does not always mean what we think it means. You can do it by politics, conservative to extremely liberal. If you remember Babylon 5, you had the Parliament of Dreams. The conservative were the Membari. I mean, yeah, the Centauri were very liberal. By purpose, you can have groups devoted to complete devotion to deity versus complete devotion to self. Adam Sinclair of Catherine Kurtz and Deborah Turner Harris Wheeler's Adept series is an example of somebody totally devoted to deity versus their Lodge of the Links, which are people complete only self-satisfaction. From by practice, meditation to complicated rituals, Zen or Chan Buddhism, pre-Vatican 1966 Catholic Church. Isaac Bonwit once said that one of the most powerful rituals he ever attended was done by a priest in the pre-Vatican 1966 Catholic Church in Latin by a priest who knew energy work. And then the last category is religious. I meet a lot of agnostic pagans. I have met some atheistic pagans. A good friend of mine was a Gnostic. You've got religious and spiritual people. Now, I see the difference between spirituality and religion as religion is something that focuses mainly on a written word. Spirituality tends to be, say I go to India, I learn the Hindu tradition for 20 years, I create a form of it like Deepak Chopra did, and I bring it back to fellow whites or fellow people in the West. That's one form. Spirituality is also a little more going by spirit rather than the letter of the law. Unfortunately, I have, it looks like I'm going to need another video on this, but when you talk about handedness, I'm going to finish on handedness because stereotypic mainstream sees handedness as left hand, you eat babies, you have orgies, you do all sorts of nasty stuff. And of course the right hand path, oh, you're so perfect, you're a saint. In magic and stuff, it's not really that way. The left hand path, at least in Western magic, is more self-centered, yes. But some of the most ethical people I've met have been some form of Satanist. They have been I think one woman was practically vegan. And so it's the right-hand path in the more magical world is connection. It's sort of like in Taoism where you connect, you become part of the Tao again, versus, from what I've read in the left-hand path and what little I've been told, instead of becoming part of the light or the Tao, you want to become your own form of God. That is, and it's not my thing. I'm basically middle path. I was taught when I first started, you go to the center. You can go to the extremes to learn, but you always come back to center. That's how you also grow. But handedness isn't even what people think it is and it's still, I was ordained in the Tibetan Tantric system. It was considered a left-hand ordination, but it wasn't evil. It just meant that I was ordained by spirit, and I was ordained, only had 14 vows to keep, but they were very, very cosmic, and I had to deal with my fellow yogins and yoginis and my guru. Unlike being monastic where I had to cut my hair and all sorts of stuff. So part 2 is coming up next.